Erev Tov, everyone. Parshat Kedoshim, the pasuk tells us, Ish imo v'oviv tiro v'shapsosai tishmoru ani Hashem. So the juxtaposition of the mitzvah of Ish imo v'oviv tiro and Shabbos is not accidental. What is the Torah teaching us here? On the surface, at least, it's two completely disparate and different mitzvot. So the simple explanation is that they are both next to each other in the Aseret HaDvarim. Shabbat is the fourth of the commandments, and Kibbutz V'Aim is the fifth. So that they, so to speak, they go together because of where they're placed. Rashi points out that here the aim comes before the Av. The mother comes before the father, because we're talking here about Yira. We're not talking about Kibud. We're talking about awe. We're talking about a feeling of trepidation if you transgress it. And so since mothers are basically kinder to children than fathers, the female nature is, in most cases, much softer. So therefore, there would be less yira. So in order to emphasize that there should be this idea of yira regarding the mother as well, so therefore the mother was placed first here in the pasuk. So it's ish imo v'oviv tiro. Then Rashi comments, what's the connection between the two? Rashi says what on the surface is a strange thing, that if a person's parents would tell the child to desecrate the Shabbos, even though there is a commandment to listen to the parents, nevertheless, the child should not do so because of the fact, Ani Hashem, your parents are obligated to listen to me, and therefore you have no obligation to listen to them if it contravenes any of the mitzvahs of the Torah. So the question arises in halacha, the Gemara discusses it. Are there limits to parental insistence upon things? And the halacha is very lenient towards the child. That once a child becomes a gadol, once he reaches a maturity, now maturity here is not only bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, which in our time is really difficult because most 13 and 12-year-olds are still playing with the phone, which they will continue to do for the next 70 years. So it's hard to assign maturity to that. And nevertheless, there's a concept of somuch al shulchan aviv. He's dependent upon the parent for food, for sustenance, for shelter. So that can exist, there are people who are in their late 20s and 30s The dad never leave home. They are dependent, and therefore, because of their dependence, they are not considered, so to speak, a gadol in those terms, because they're not independent. They don't have the ability to be on their own. So because of that, therefore, for instance, we have a halacha. Is a parent entitled to tell his or her child who to marry, which is really one of the basic decisions in life? The halacha is that the parent has no role to play. The child can marry whoever he or she wishes. And the parent has no right to prevent the marriage. As a practical matter, we find that this was, perhaps even today is, still not the norm. Most people don't set out to marry someone against the wishes of their parents. In many circles in Eastern Europe, that was the origin for the custom that they betrothed children while they were still minors, one to another, so that the parent chose the spouse. The child was a minor yet. And later, when the child reached maturity, since they were already betrothed, there already were tanoim, there already was an obligation, that's who they married. Whether or not that meets with the requirements of today's society is very difficult to assess. But anyway, there are limits to the parent's role. There are obligations that the Gemara in Kedushin assigns to parents as to how to raise children. But when the child is old enough, the child goes and does on his own. So now we have the problem. It's a related problem. It's not the same thing, because here we're talking about Yira for an Av and an Aim, about Kibbud Av Aim. But there's another concept that underlies this. So it's obvious that if the Av Aim says to be Machal Shabbos, so then the Rashi says the Av Aim are obligated to listen to the Rabbanu Shalom. So therefore the child has no duty to listen to them if they go against it. That's why it says Ani Hashem. We have a concept in halacha of ein shliach ledvar avera. Now, just in general, there's a mechanism in halacha called shlichut. In law, it's called agency. I can hire somebody or I can appoint someone to do something for me. I can make you my shliach. So to the extent that the Gemara points out that one can appoint a shliach to betroth a woman to him, or one can appoint a shliach, which happens very often, to deliver a divorce. The husband is in Miami Beach, the woman is in New York, and they're not going to meet face to face. So the Rov in Miami Beach prepares the divorce, and the husband appoints a shliach and the shliach appoints someone in New York that will deliver the get to her. It's a whole, I don't want to go into all the complications, but it's very common. And the Gemara says, Shlucho Shalom Kamoso. The shliach stands instead of the mishaleach, in the place of the one who stands him, who sends him. So that's a tremendous chidush. That's a tremendous novel idea. I tell you to go and do something for me, and you go and do it. It's like the fact that I did it, even though as a practical matter, I did nothing. And this is an entire halachic concept, again, mainly in the Gemara Kedushin and Gidon, that deals with the dinim of shlichus. So there's an exception to this rule. The exception to the rule is ein shliach ledvar avera. You cannot appoint a shliach to do a sin, to do something that's wrong. Now, in common law, we have all of these rules that even a conspiracy one is liable for. If somebody is the head of a gang and he sends one member of the gang to do a crime, it's as though he himself did the crime. In halacha, that's not true. Because the Gemara says, Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmid, Divrei Mishomim. Who told you to listen to the head of the gang? You know, the Rebbeinu Shalom told you not to do it. So why is Ein Shliach Ledvar Avera? Why is that the exception? So there are various reasons that are advanced by the great scholar of Israel to attempt to define the matter. One is that the whole concept of appointing a shliach, as I mentioned earlier, is itself a chidush, is itself something out of the ordinary. Ordinarily, you would say you can't appoint anybody to do anything for me. You want to do it yourself. You're you and I'm I, and we don't have anything in common. So this was, so to speak, a operation of law instituted by the Torah to allow someone else to do something for me. So the Torah only put it into motion, actuated it, when you're doing something good. But when you're doing an Aveira, the Torah didn't give you that power. You can't appoint a shliach. So one concept is that there is no shlichut l'dvar Aveira. The reason that ein shliach l'dvar Aveira is because of ein shlichut l'dvar Aveira. There is no power of agency to do a sin. There's a second concept, and that concept we find also based on a Talmudic idea. There's an opinion that the Mishaleach, the one who sends the person, let's say, to commit the crime, so even though that person did not commit the crime, but rather the person that he sent is the one that did so, nevertheless, he is not liable b'dinei odom. Here at our court, we can't do anything to him. But b'dinei shamayim, he is chayav. But the way heaven would look at it, he bears responsibility. And therefore, if the crime is committed, so in the judgment of heaven, not only will the shliach be chayev, but the mishaleach will also be chayev, the one who sent him. This presupposes that there is a shlichus here. There is an active agency that has occurred. The only thing is we can't do anything about it. But so to speak, morally, in heaven, the shlichus is there, and it's like he committed the crime, and he will also be obligated. The third idea that is mentioned here of ein shliach ledvar aveira is itself what the Gemara says, divrei harav, divrei hatalmid, divrei mi shomim. We always have choices who we listen to, who influences us, whose orders, so to speak, we follow. So when we're children, we follow our parents because we have no choice. When we mature and we have choices, so then it's a question of whose influences do we follow. So the Torah presupposed that one would want to follow the Divrei Harav. One would like to follow what the Lord enjoined for us. By not listening to that, by showing, so to speak, a loyalty to something else, so then we violate the principle of v'ahavtos Hashem l'kecha v'chol levavecha nafshecha v'chol me'odecha, because we placed a barrier between our relationship with God and our actions and what we should do. So even though this din here of a parent telling a child to be mechalel Shabbos is not exactly the same category as ein shliach ledvar aveira, it's at a different level. Nevertheless, it's based on the same idea. And the idea is that when a person is mature and has choices, and we make choices every day in myriad matters, so then we always have to be cognizant of whose choice we have chosen and to whom we are ultimately responsible. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'zakas Yisrael v'chicham chiber lahem Torah mitzvot shenemar Adonai chafetz u'mam tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir.